Under the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight fades into endless blue, two small boats cut through the waves, their decks low, their wakes narrow, their destinations uncertain. Within seconds, the calm sea would erupt into a fiery confrontation. The US military has confirmed 2 strikes against what it calls narcotics-running vessels, operations carried out under direct authorization from President Donald J. Trump. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth released footage of the attack on his official X account. In the grainy video, flashes of light streak across the horizon before erupting into explosions that scatter debris across the water. In a caption accompanying the footage, Hegseth declared, "Yesterday, at the direction of President Trump, 2 lethal kinetic strikes were conducted on 2 vessels operated by designated terrorist organizations. Both strikes were conducted in international waters. All 6 male narco-terrorists were killed. No US forces were harmed." The announcement has triggered waves of reaction across diplomatic and humanitarian circles. For Washington, this is the latest in a series of high-intensity operations meant to dismantle transnational networks accused of funding extremist groups through the narcotics trade. But for others, the strikes raise pressing questions about legality, jurisdiction, and the growing militarization of anti-drug efforts at sea. According to US defense officials, the targeted vessels were sailing along what intelligence agencies describe as a known narco-trafficking corridor stretching from Central America into the Eastern Pacific, a region long known for cartel movements between Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico. Hegseth said US reconnaissance had tracked the boats for more than 18 hours before authorizing the strike, citing credible intelligence linking the operators to designated terrorist networks. The 6 men killed have not yet been identified. No country has formally claimed them as nationals. That ambiguity has fueled renewed debate about whether the United States is extending its counter-terror operations into zones traditionally governed by maritime policing and not by acts of war. International law experts say the issue lies in the definition of narco-terrorism. Washington's position, reinforced by the Trump administration's recent executive order, allows for lethal action against any organization or vessel engaged in drug trafficking that supports terrorism, even in international waters. Critics, however, warn that such an expansive interpretation blurs the line between law enforcement and warfare. At the Pentagon, officials insist the strikes were justified. One senior defense analyst, speaking on background, noted that the boats were not civilian fishing craft, but military-modified vessels carrying what US intelligence described as multi-ton payloads of processed narcotics. The video released by Hegseth appears to show the impact of guided munitions, likely from a US Navy aircraft or drone. Moments before the explosion, the footage freezes on a dark silhouette in open waters. Then a flash, a plume of smoke, and silence. Hegseth later elaborated that the operation was part of a wider initiative known as Operation Shieldwave, a joint command effort integrating naval, aerial, and satellite surveillance to intercept drug-linked vessels before they reach coastal transfer points. Since its inception in early 2025, the program has carried out at least 17 strikes, resulting in 76 confirmed deaths, according to US figures, a number that has drawn both praise from anti-cartel advocates and condemnation from international rights groups. The tone of Hegseth's message reflected the administration's hardened stance. He wrote, "Under President Trump, we are protecting the homeland and killing these cartel terrorists who wish to harm our country and its people." Within hours, reaction poured in from across the political spectrum. Supporters hailed it as another example of Trump's deterrence doctrine, projecting strength beyond America's borders. Conservative commentators framed it as the necessary evolution of the war on drugs, one that recognizes cartels as global terror networks rather than criminal syndicates. But humanitarian organizations voiced concern over the precedent being set. Amnesty International issued a statement urging Washington to disclose evidence linking the victims to terrorism, emphasizing that lethal force outside a declared conflict zone requires transparency and accountability. The International Maritime Organization also requested clarification from the US Navy regarding the exact coordinates of the strikes, stressing the need to avoid escalation in international shipping lanes. In Latin America, the reaction was mixed. Officials in Colombia and Ecuador, 2 countries often cited as origin points for Pacific-bound drug routes, quietly acknowledged US cooperation but refrained from public endorsement. Mexican officials speaking to local press said they were not informed of the strikes in advance, but noted that any operation targeting transnational cartels must be evaluated under international maritime law. Analysts say the use of the term designated terrorist organizations in Hegseth's post may indicate the boats were linked to cartel factions recently added to the US terror list, a designation that enables military rather than law enforcement engagement. That shift, authorized earlier this year, has effectively transformed certain anti-narcotics missions into counter-terror strikes. What remains unclear is whether these new rules of engagement will invite retaliatory measures. Security experts warn that cartels have adapted before, arming themselves with high-caliber weapons, drones, and paramilitary tactics that blur the distinction between insurgents and smugglers. In Washington, administration officials insist the campaign is paying off. According to internal briefings, narcotics flow through the Eastern Pacific has dropped by nearly 18% since mid-2025, though independent analysts dispute those figures, arguing that traffickers simply reroute shipments through the Caribbean or overland corridors. For President Trump, the strikes fit into a broader narrative of aggressive border defense, one that extends the concept of homeland security beyond physical frontiers. Earlier this year, he authorized the creation of the Maritime Counter-Terror Command, a task force blending the capabilities of the Navy, Coast Guard, and intelligence services. Its mission: identify, target, and neutralize transnational threats before they reach American waters. Pentagon sources have described the command's operations as highly classified, but confirmed that it uses satellite-linked targeting from the new Pacific Overwatch system. That network, run jointly with private defense contractors, tracks suspected narco routes using a combination of radar buoys, infrared imaging, and autonomous drones. The strike on Sunday, officials say, was one of the first to integrate real-time AI-driven reconnaissance. As details emerge, the conversation in Washington is shifting toward oversight. Congressional leaders have demanded classified briefings on the operation's authorization chain, with some lawmakers questioning whether Congress was notified beforehand. Senator Lindsey Graham defended the strikes, calling them a message to every cartel on earth that America's patience has run out. In contrast, Senator Chris Murphy criticized the lack of transparency, saying, "We are drifting into a pattern of undeclared maritime warfare." On the diplomatic front, regional allies are treading carefully. Panama and Costa Rica, whose coastlines border the key transit lanes, have privately expressed concern that US operations could push traffickers closer to their shores, sparking violence in their territorial waters. Meanwhile, the families of fishermen and sailors operating in the same region are demanding assurances that safeguards are in place to prevent mistaken targeting. Local unions in Ecuador and Peru have asked Washington to release the geolocation data of the strikes to verify that they occurred outside exclusive economic zones. In the broader geopolitical context, the timing of the operation is telling. It comes just days after a joint summit on maritime security, where US officials pushed for a global coalition to classify narco cartels as terror networks. The proposal, still under negotiation at the United Nations, would grant states greater latitude to conduct cross-border or offshore strikes under the legal justification of counter-terrorism. Human rights lawyers argue that such reclassification could erode key safeguards under international law, allowing countries to bypass extradition and due process. Yet within the administration, officials believe the move is essential to break the nexus between drugs, terrorism, and organized crime. As Defense Secretary Hegseth's footage continues to circulate online, it has become both a rallying cry and a warning. Supporters see it as proof of US resolve. Critics view it as a dangerous symbol of unchecked force. In the video's final frame, the ocean has returned to silence, smoke trailing upward, waves slowly closing over the wreckage. For now, 6 more lives have been lost in what Washington calls a war for security and what others describe as a war without borders. The Pacific, vast and indifferent, holds its secrets beneath the surface, while above, a growing debate unfolds over where the line between defense and aggression truly lies. And as the sun sets over those same waters, the question remains: how far will the United States go in the name of protecting its homeland, and at what cost to the laws that govern the seas it now patrols with lethal precision?